Deceptive fireflies?
Can you change a script at the last second?
More on those topics and more in today's BioTrekkie with the Admiral, starting now. Hello, and welcome back to BioTrekkie with the Admiral. I'm Mohamed Noor. I'm a biology professor at Duke University, and I'm an occasional science consultant for the Star Trek universe. I'm here with my co-host, Jayne Brook.
Hi, I'm Jayne. I played Admiral Katrina Cornwell in the first 2 seasons of Discovery, and I'm here with Mohamed as Mohamed's friend and enthusiastic biology student learning about biology here on Earth through the lens of Star Trek. So today we are discussing episodes 10 and 11. Mohamed, just as a summary, can you tell us a few things that struck you biology-wise in these episodes?
Sure, happy to do that. So, these are going to be aside from the big reveal about what is the burn, separate from that. But in episode 11, the more recent one, there were 2 genetics terms that got slipped into the episode, both recombination and epigenetics. Now, the first one actually we heard in the pilot to the entire series, so in the Vulcan Hello back in season 1. We can talk about that a little bit. The second one, I think I kind of slipped in there, so we can talk about that as well. The last thing is back to episode 10, seeing those fireflies in there reminded me about some cool biology I've heard about fireflies here on Earth.
Cool. So let's start with the last, and we'll go backwards from episode 11 to episode 10. So tell us a little bit about what you've just summarized for us in episode 11.
Sure. On the first of those, recombination, I actually already have a BioTrekkie Explains video talking about the usage of recombination, and I'll put a link to that here in the comments in this episode description here on YouTube. But let me talk about it briefly anyway. So recombination is pretty cool. Now, the way most people have heard about recombination is this. So we get 1 copy of just about all our genes from our mom, 1 copy of just about all our genes from our dad, right? So then you have 2 copies of all the genes. So you can use you as an example. And you've passed on 1 copy of all your genes to your daughter, for example. So let's use your eldest daughter as an example. You passed on 1 copy to her. Now, what you passed on to your eldest daughter was not necessarily exactly the set you got from your mom or exactly the set you got from your dad, right? But it's a new combination, hence the term recombination, right? Makes sense in that sense. So that's where the term comes from. And it's a term that's been around since this is before we even knew DNA was the hereditary material. People knew about this process. Now, that's not the way they're using it here in these episodes, which is kind of interesting. But for that to work, what happens is, you get a chromosome, let's say, for example, a copy of chromosome 12 from your mom, a copy of chromosome 12 from your dad. What happens is they essentially stick together at a point, and then they break, and you glue this one from your mom with this one from your dad. So that's how you get that new combination that's passed on, right? So
but it remains 12, number 12.
Yeah, just specifically, I'm just picking a random one of your 23 pairs of chromosomes. So you get this thing which has half of chromosome 12 from your mom and half of chromosome 12 from your dad, and that's what you pass on to your daughter. Now, there was a DNA break that happened at the point where those things had to get stitched back together. That process of repairing DNA breaks is sometimes also called recombination. Right. So in the episode, what's been happening, this is now, I talk about more in the context of your gametes and things, but this happens even just within your cells. If you get DNA breaks, there's a process that has to occur to essentially stitch the chromosomes back together. And that is also sometimes called recombination. And one of the ways you get these DNA breaks is from exposure to radiation. So that's what happened both in the Vulcan Hello and the pilot of the entire series, as well as in this most recent episode that we just watched. That in the most recent one, Book was exposed to a lot of radiation. Presumably he had a lot of DNA breaks. So they brought him back to the ship and they had some recombination process.
Right, because I was going to ask about that. Yeah, they were able, and even he did something to Michael when she came back onto his ship. Yeah. He said, "This will help you." I don't know if there was a mini recombination.
I don't know. Now, normally this happens naturally. I don't know this, I'm not sure how they're manipulating recombination, but again, this is 1,000 years in the future. So it could be something related to that. Yeah. It's an interesting usage of the term though, because most people don't know that usage of the term recombination. So it's very interesting that the writers have used it not once, but multiple times now in this series. Because I know some molecular biologists have never heard of that before. They know the process, but they've never heard that actually called recombination. So
Oh,
kudos to them. I'm
interesting.
not sure where it came from, but kudos.
Maybe Erica. She's a biologist,
That was my
right?
guess.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Maybe Erica
Yeah.
Lippold, possibly.
Yeah.
I don't. Was she there in the very first episode? I don't remember if she was part of that or not, or she came
I
in a
don't
little bit
remember
later.
either because I wasn't there either. So
Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the very,
So-
oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
You said something that will show what I don't know about. You said we get almost a full set from our mother
Yes.
and almost a full set
Yeah.
from our
The
father.
reason-
I always thought we got a full set.
I was being careful because I know biologists tend to nitpick. Now, for example,
Oh.
the only reason I say that is any genes that are on your mitochondria, you just get from your mom. And then things like so for example, I as a male, I have an X and a Y. I only got the Y from my dad.
Right,
So that's why I used
Okay.
almost because I figured some biologists are going to be watching and say,
That's not true.
actually.
Okay, you protected yourself there. Yeah,
There you
because
go.
when you're in like the little biology class, in school, you get all from your mom, all from your dad.
Exactly.
So that's
pretty much
interesting.
all.
Yeah, pretty much all. And what about epigenetics?
Epigenetics. This is great. So we have genes that are made of DNA, right? And you're probably familiar that there's like 4 DNA building blocks. So we tend to abbreviate ACGT. So you tend to see that when you see a DNA sequence like AAG, ATC, or something like that.
Right.
So DNA guides the formation of proteins, and proteins are the real building blocks for everything in your body, right? Those DNA building blocks, the letters there, they tell you exactly what protein will be made, and they give some information about how much, where in your body, when to make it, things like that. But they don't give all the information about that. Some of that is actually gotten from the environment, right? And when I say the environment, it could be exposure like temperature, it could be radiation, it could be just what cell type you're in, it could be exposure to chemicals. So epigenetics is the way that the environment changes those aspects without any change in those DNA letters, right? That's what
so
epigenetics
somebody
is.
with the same letters, but in wildly different circumstances.
Exactly. Or different cells in your
consequence would
body.
be different.
Right. So for example, like, you have a muscle cell, when it divides, it doesn't make a nerve cell, it makes another muscle cell, so that's part of this because there's epigenetic programming associated with that. The ones that are not programmed are probably the ones that you're familiar with. You've heard called often stem cells, right? Those are ones that don't have this.
That's what that is. Okay.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about stem cells.
There you go. So they can become almost any kind of cell, whereas other ones that have basically have been programmed in some way to do something. That part of that is epigenetic. And sometimes it's reversible because again, it's environmental. So sometimes it's reversible, sometimes it's not. Mechanically, the way it works, there's a couple of different ways epigenetics can work. But sometimes what happens is you can have the addition of like a chemical, like a CH3, a methyl group, to specific one of those letters. And what that might do is it might fix the gene to an off state. Let's say, for example, it's something that it's necessary for nerve cells, but not necessary for muscle cells. That's one way of doing it, is basically sticking those little groups to it. And those, again, the effects from that, this is the kind of thing that can be affected by the environment, and it can be sometimes reversible too. So.
Well, this is interesting because as you're talking, I'm thinking medicine, and biology and medicine, because I'm thinking, well, when I had my girls, I saved their stem cells or whatever from the umbilical cord, but also with stem cell transplants, which are used in medicine, you're saying the stem cells can become any kind of cell. So when they replace someone who's sick, when they replace their stem cells, it's in the hope that the healthy new stem cells will become
what you need,
any
right there.
other kind of cell in your body that you will need. So it's not to become a specific cell. It's just to go into your body and be good soldiers.
Exactly.
Making good cells where needed.
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is where embryonic stem cells are one of the kinds people hear about all the time. That's because, of course, an embryo, it only has a couple of cells, so it has to become everything.
Right.
So that's where that comes from.
I never even thought of that. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
it's cool stuff, huh?
That makes sense. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And one thing I liked about inserting that in there is that so much of science fiction focuses on genetic change and mutation and things like that, but they don't focus on something which is much simpler, which is basically just turning on or off different genes that you already have. And that's something that happens all the time. So that's why I tried to slip that in there.
That's good. And then you have a show on that, or the recombination, or both.
Actually, well, I'll go ahead and record one on epigenetics as well, and we can release it later this week.
So you'll have to let people know. Okay, good.
I'll put that in the description too.
Oh, great. That's great, because people can learn further. Okay, that's great.
Yeah, I'll do that with some graphics and stuff to make it a little bit easier to follow.
Yeah, because then you can. So that's those two. And what about the fireflies?
Fireflies are just so cool, right? I mean, do you have fireflies?
I grew up with fireflies, and we always thought little kids, we always thought if you could catch them at the second they were lit,
I did the same
they
thing.
would stay alight forever. Or, there were boys in the neighborhood who would say, if we cut them in half, the moment that they're lit up, they'll stay. You could wear them as a ring.
I did that actually before, and it does stay for a while, but it doesn't stay for very long. It stays for it stays like a few minutes. It doesn't stay
that's not too bad, a few minutes. But anyway, fireflies are magical, and I live in California now, so I don't see them. But
I didn't know they weren't there. We have some over here in North Carolina, not a ton, but you'll see them sometimes in the summer. They're out there. Not in large numbers like when I was a kid. I remember as a kid just seeing huge numbers of them.
Fun, huge.
Here we see the occasional couple, oh, look, a firefly.
So that's a question. Is that because North Carolina has never had many, or our environment has changed to the point where we don't have fireflies?
Yeah, I don't know how much of that's the environment, or even just just the local area. It's possibly since I grew up right next to a forest that that.
Oh, that's probably why. Yeah,
that could very well.
Yeah.
So they're kind of cool in the sense, in terms of when you think of the way they light up. There's two ways you can say why they light up. So mechanically, it's pretty cool. They have this chemical called luciferin. You can guess what that means from the name.
Right.
That with an enzyme, which is called luciferase, oxygen to energy that can emit the light. It's a cool chemical reaction, and if you Google it, the chemical reaction comes up. But I always, as an evolutionary biologist, I like to think about it more why as opposed to how, right?
Like why? What purpose?
What purpose does it serve? Exactly. And a lot of it is, not always, but a lot of it is for finding members of the opposite sex. Right. And it's often you'll see the males are the ones that are flying, and the females are down kind of just above the grass. And they're both flash. It's not necessarily, it depends on the species, but they'll both flash, and they find each other that way. But there's a cool trick. There's a pair of species, or a pair, actually, I guess they're genera. So Photurus and Photinus. So
different kinds of
fireflies. Yeah.
Oh, so I didn't even know there were different kinds of fireflies.
Oh yeah, no, there's a bunch. Yeah. But this one species has females that will flash the same as the other species females. So then males from that other species will come up and they'll say, "Oh, good, it's a girl." They come to try to mate, and the females eat them. They lure them in.
Yeah, that's like the Black Widow, right?
Right.
While she mates and then eats the, I don't know what.
Yeah. Well, except in this case, it's like completely different species. They don't fertilize or anything. It's just like they just lure them in by flashing
so
the other species
females
signals.
Are the soldiers of that,
right? They raid the males for this. Yeah, that's called aggressive mimicry.
Oh my God.
Very
so
mimicry.
do the males of that species have any protective feature that keeps them from getting eaten?
That's a wonderful question. So that gets into, there's a lot of theory about what allows deceptive signals to persist. Because if a signal is bad, pretty quickly, things would learn to avoid it, right? There's two conditions that are common for deceptive signals. One is rarity. So that, for example, if the mimics are much rarer than the model species, then that's one way that you can have that persist for a long time with the males figuring it out, or evolution, not necessarily like consciously figuring out, but just evolutionarily.
But how would they ever figure it out? Because if it's mimicking the exact female, then you can't not. You nailed the second one. Pay attention to any female.
Exactly. You nailed the second one. The second one is high cost to not responding. If the males don't mate with the females,
there goes your whole
thing. Yep, exactly. You nailed it. That's exactly it.
So the males can't really, it would be up to the females of the original series to come up with a new signal and let their guys know.
Yeah, right. But the problem is, if they're doing a completely new signal, the males probably won't immediately respond. But if it does start to happen, it could, you could imagine some sort of arms race kind of thing where, let's say, for example, a subset of males do find those females, then, they might then.
But then the mimicking females will just
probably
be like,
switch to.
Nice guy, we're just going to mimic you again.
Yeah.
How interesting.
Evolutionary arms races. Gotta love them.
Evolution. Wow. And so, they're just fighting with each other for superiority.
Yep. One just wants food, and one just wants to mate and have babies.
Wow.
Isn't that cool? I love that story.
Wow. That is, I wonder how many, the only other story like that I know is, and I don't know the particulars, is the Black Widow. Isn't she known? That's why she's called a Black Widow.
I think
because she's larger than the male.
Yep.
We have a lot of Black Widows in California.
Mm-hmm.
I have them all over the place, but the female is large and the male is small, and she eats him, right?
Yeah, that's called sexual cannibalism. There's a couple of species that do that too.
That's terrible.
The male gets his thing and they're like,
"You're not going to be with anyone after me."
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Oh, wow.
Which,
Does
I mean,
any
if it
others?
helps pass on his genes, let's say, for example, essentially, you can think of males as almost like just sacks of gametes. If he passes on his genes that way and gets lots of kids, then maybe by feeding the mom, it's better off than going and trying to find another female, just in terms of passing on more of his genes.
Oh,
Maybe.
he's feeding her. I guess she
Yeah.
eats
I'm
off
not
of
sure
him.
if that's the case for the Black Widow specifically, but in
Oh,
general, that's a possibility for
right,
sexual cannibalism.
right. It's not very nice for the guy, though.
No,
He's
no.
I wonder if any of them ever get away. I'll have to go look into that.
Yeah, like,
Uh,
okay, I'm done. I'm running off
yeah,
now.
run. Yeah, while she's smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, right. Oh
You could do a
man.
funny you could do a funny animation on that.
Oh my goodness. Yeah,
Uh,
I'm sure some exist. I'm sure some exist. Oh,
well,
man.
anything else biologically? I'm trying to think if anything
Not,
struck me.
not biologically, but I have a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind.
Okay.
So, thinking to the episode I mentioned that I contributed a little bit, not very much, of course, but the epigenetics terms that I stuck in there. I had a draft of the script. So I saw a draft from November 2019.
Okay.
It must have finished before March 2020, of course, right? Because that's when
Right.
all the shutdowns happen, things like
Oh,
that.
right.
And looking at it, like, they follow the script, but not exactly. And I thought it was pretty close to a final script. I thought, because I mean, they said they were sending it to print, what I'm not sure exactly what that means. So that got me thinking, like, how early? I mean, I'm assuming that this went fairly quickly after that to the actors and for the scene. How early do you tend to get scripts? How closely do you follow? Can you change a couple of words? And how much input do you have for possible changes?
So it's probably, I mean, the unsatisfactory answers is probably different for every show.
I'm sure.
But some shows get the scripts out fairly, what we would call far in advance. Like you'll get a script a week in advance or a week and a half. A lot of people.
Wow, a week is far in advance.
Well, sometimes, or a couple. Actually, they have to have some sort of script ready. Let me get this right. They have to have some sort of script ready a few weeks before, so they can do pre-production. But they don't give the actors the script until they're really pretty sure they like it. So they'll let there are different levels of scripts. Like the people who have to build the sets or the director, they might get to have eyes on an outline or something like that, but they don't really want to show the actors and get a bunch of phone calls from actors before it's done. But and it depends on the people running the show and the writer. Like some shows get their scripts very last minute and some get them a little bit more in advance. I think for production, the bigger question, what normally happens is the writers work as a writer's room. Somebody is given the script, they write, they're working on it for months. And then there's a read through. So the actors get the published script, first draft. And I don't know if you knew about this, but there's different colors that you go through. I've done this for so many years and I still don't know the colors, but the white script is the first. You get, the first version is white, and then you get the yellow pages, the blue pages, the pink pages, the green pages, the double yellow, the orange, the amber, and each color, I'm not doing those in order, but each color denotes a new set of rewrites that I used to always collate it. And then after a while, I was just like, I can't, I'll just write it in. But you do a read through a few days before you start shooting. And the thing is, the actors are pulled out at lunch. They're shooting one episode and they take their lunch period to do a read through of the following episode. And the reason I'm saying this is sometimes they're not completely focused. They're focused, but they're saying hello to people they haven't seen, and you're doing a read through. So the writers, it's useful for the writers to hear the script. The actors are just sitting around a table, and some actors are very good about completely acting it out. I was never, a huge fan of read throughs. I never really, I don't feel like I was as good just sitting in a chair. I kind of have to be on my feet. But so the writers will make some changes at that point. I think what is irritating for production is when the production schedule has been planned very, very carefully by the director and the first AD, and they say, we're going to need 4 hours for this scene. We're just doing a two-hander here. We'll do this one in 2 hours. They work out their day very carefully with a little bit of rehearsal to figure out where people are going to go. And then if an actor arrives on the set and says, I don't really know if I like this scene. You know, I don't think she would
Mm,
ever, blah, blah, blah. The whole production comes to a complete halt
mm,
while phone calls are made. And in the many, many years that I've been doing this, years and years ago, actors used to play a little fast and loose, sometimes with the
mm,
script. They would sometimes, like, you know, paraphrase. And then I think writers, especially because writers are powerful in TV, they're the executive producers. I think they got a little sick of it and they started to say, you have to say exactly what my lines are, or you've got to get approval to change it. And I don't blame them. There's a point of view from each point of view. The writers are like, you know, we've written this script. Can you just give it a chance? And the actors are like, well, we haven't been on our feet with it until this moment, and we need a chance as well. And I think that the fair assessment of what's going on depends on, I mean, like any business, there's different personalities, there's people approach things in different ways, people deal with their nerves in different ways.
mhm,
I will say, as an actor, that a lot of actors want to change the script before they've really given it a chance, because it makes them a little uncomfortable. They wouldn't really say something that way. And
mhm. Feel stiff or something.
there's a famous story of some, you know, yeah, they feel, but it might not be this, it might be the script's fault. And
Mm,
a really good actor can be a great service to a writer.
mhm,
Writers do love an actor who truly is just wanting to make the whole piece better,
mhm,
and they can contribute because they are in the shoes, and the
mhm.
writer can be like, wow, you know, I hadn't seen it that way. So there's a real collaboration in this business. But obviously sometimes, you know, sometimes a change may not need to be made, or sometimes a change may need to be made, and then the writer doesn't want to make it. Who knows? There's some famous funny story where an actor went up to a writer once, and I think it was quite a well-known writer. I'm going to screw up this story, but they went up to the writer and they had the script, and they were like, my character would never say this. And the writer apparently took the script and looked and said to the writer, said to the actor, yes, they would. It says right here that you say,
I love that. Fair.
you know, I was like, yeah, your character does say this because it says it right here. I mean, it's a fun story, but so yeah, I've had, and it depends on the actor. Like some actors will say, you may not, they'll make it very clear, you may not give me changes of lines while I'm sitting in the makeup chair, like 2 seconds before I'm going to go on, because some actors are dyslexic. It takes them quite a while to learn. Or like in
Very
Star Trek,
fair.
or if you're learning,
Oh, you got a lot of technobabble. Yeah.
or not even technobabble, but if you're, doing it in another language, and
Oh, yeah.
anyway, you can't relearn. But it's not, so sometimes you get the script far enough in advance to really work on it. Hopefully that's the case. And hopefully actors really, really consider it and give the writers time, call the writers in advance to say, this is bumping for me, and then it works well. But yeah, I can't remember if I answered all your questions. How far in advance? Oh, how much input do you have? It probably depends on your relationship with the writer.
Mhm.
And that would probably depend on, like, for example, if I'm a regular on a show, I feel like, I have a camaraderie with the writers. But if I'm a guest star, I pretty much don't say anything unless the writers ask me. I pretty much are like, I'm just a guest star. I'm just going to do what they say.
Are the writers sitting there during the performance?
They usually have a representative there.
Okay.
It's not always the writer who actually wrote it. It
Ah,
usually is, but sometimes if it's like the head person who needs to be back in LA and you're on location, maybe they'll send someone up, and then you approach that person and say, I'm having trouble with this or that.
gotcha.
But I mean, I'll ask questions to understand more of what I'm saying, but
Mhm.
I don't, unless you're a regular, you shouldn't really be demanding changes.
No, that's totally fair. That's totally fair.
Yeah.
What about the
So
showrunners? The showrunner there when you're filming, or is the showrunner back with the writers?
I'm sure the showrunner would love to be in 9 places at once,
Probably
because the
true.
showrunner would love to be on the set, and then the showrunner also has to be in post, and the
Mhm.
showrunner, also has to be in the writing room. It's a lot. So
A
I
lot
think the
of
showrunner is there
responsibility.
sometimes, but they have to be running their writing room, and they also have to be doing the post. So they can't be there the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise they abandon the other things they need to do. So
I have a random
yeah.
question then. Do you ever have like
Yeah.
family members there to watch?
That used to be much more. Well, yeah, you do, of course. And
Mhm.
but it used to be it seems like it used to be much more.
Normal or
I think
common?
what's happened is we used to get all of our scripts on paper, and now that
Mm,
everything is digital, everything is very super, super, super secret, and
mm,
non-disclosure agreements, and
mhm.
the scripts that you're given electronically have your name across it.
Yeah, I
So
noticed that with the one I had too. It had my name
yeah.
across there.
So
There's like,
if that copy shows up,
yep.
somewhere, they know exactly who gave it.
Yep.
So I think with all the super duper secrecy and all that, and because a family member who visited 20 years ago would just be able to tell their friends at dinner, if they were,
I didn't even think about the secret aspect.
oh,
Oh, that's true.
this person dies. But these days,
Yeah.
I mean, people of course visit, but they, you have to be careful that they're not going to disclose things
Yeah.
and
Oh,
stuff.
that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And I think the regulars have more. When you're a regular on a show, then your significant others are kind of part of the family.
Yeah.
If you're just, once again, if you're just visiting, a visiting actor, you might not
Yeah.
ask if somebody
Any
can
personal
visit.
experiences to share on any of those, or were you
People
sort of saying
visiting.
it? Yeah,
Well,
you're
I
sort of saying. I mean, or the
personally,
visiting, or on the changes, or anything like that. I mean, you're describing it very in the
oh, well,
in
I'm
the.
pretty good about, like, I don't know if I still am, but like I never minded. Like a lot of times when I was on a show, I would be handed changes of lines in the makeup chair,
Mhm.
and I'd be like, okay, and either out of panic or, I mean, I don't know if I've told this story. Did I tell this story? Who was I telling? Did I tell you the story about when I started out decades ago and I had to do a commercial in Barcelona?
No.
I was working, I'd gone to drama school in England and I was getting some money doing a commercial. I was sent to Barcelona to do a commercial for a bank there. And it was supposed to be just me running around doing things. Who knew whether or not I was, from Barcelona. Anyway, so at the very last second, I still can't believe I did this. They presented me, they said, you know what? Could you say this paragraph in Catalan? I mean, it's a language that it's not like French, which I spoke a little
No.
bit. It's not
Nobody
like
learns Catalan in school here.
completely different. Can you speak this paragraph and we'll dub you, but we need your mouth to speak all of these words and then we'll dub you, with somebody. And I remember like, yeah, sure, I can do that. And I remember going behind the flats with somebody, and I can't believe I did it. I memorized a paragraph of Catalan, I think out of sheer panic. Somebody
Wow.
they said the word and, like I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I did it.
That's amazing. I mean, it must have been like, well, I mean, it looks a little
I
bit like
had no
Spanish, but it's
time. I
still
had no
like, but
time.
it's almost
Not
like
really.
gibberish.
No,
Right?
it was gibberish to
Oh,
me. It
wow.
wasn't, because Catalan is different.
Yeah,
It's
it is different.
different
Yeah.
from, very different from, it's not, if I remember right, it's so long ago, but it's not Latin based. It's
Oh,
not
I
like,
didn't realize it's that different. Oh, my
I
bad.
don't think it's Latin. I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but
Yeah.
somebody was telling me I could be thinking of the other language. The Basque language is very different, but I
I'm
thought
not
the
sure.
Catalan was Basque. Anyway, it was a weird language that I had to learn.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
and so maybe after that, like I'll be given lines and
Yeah.
but some actors absolutely hate it
Mm,
when you change lines.
yeah.
Other actors don't want to say the lines at all. Like they just they always want to change it into their own language. And that might be their thing. I don't know. Yeah.
Fascinating. That's really great.
Yeah.
I should give you some Arabic sometime.
Yeah. Maybe I can, that's totally different.
Right? Yeah. You
Yeah,
wouldn't be able to
that'd be
read it. It would
totally
have to be
different.
transliterated.
Well, it would have to be I have a brother who studied a lot of Russian, and he would
Oh,
sometimes write me letters in Russian. I think just to be like, it was like the first half of the letter would be in Russian. So, but then he would translate it, but I would take it to my neighbor who's Russian,
yeah.
and she would, because they have a very different,
It's like a cipher.
they have a different
Yeah.
alphabet too. But
That's
yeah,
amazing. That's amazing.
yeah.
Any final
Yeah.
thoughts? That was great.
Well, no, not really. I just I want to do a shout out to Mary, Captain, well, not Captain Mary, but Captain Mary, I'll call her. I always think of the real name, but Mary and Sonequa, Michael
Yeah.
and Tilly, they had such a nice scene in episode 11. And also, I'll say Michael, Sonequa did such a good, heartfelt job on the scene with
Oh,
Sukar. I mean, when she in such a human, delicate, kind way, understood that in order to communicate with him, she would have to say, yes, I'm a program. And then
Yeah.
she looked away when he got overwhelmed and came
Extremely
back and
well
said
done.
hello. But it was very kind. It was just so kind, the way that she was trying to teach him
Yeah.
about family. And she knew she was basically talking to a child, a 5-year-old child.
Mhm.
And I absolutely adored seeing Doug.
Yes.
I knew, like, when they changed and they
Doug
showed his
himself
feet, I'm
in
going,
that
it's going to be
photo.
Doug. That was so fun. And he did a great job to be able to see Doug, real
Yeah.
Doug with
Yeah.
hair, but, and going back to episode 10 and 9 and 10, I read Michelle's tweet about, the homage to Carl Sagan for Carl, but you and I had spoken about it being sort of an homage to Doctor Who as well,
Mhm.
I love that Carl character, but just so much. Yeah. And saying goodbye, that's a big thing. Saying goodbye to Giorgio, who's just
Yeah.
so great to watch. I mean, Michelle Yeoh is just so cool. There's just couldn't possibly be cooler.
Totally. It would have been, a lot of people were commenting, it would have been interesting to see Osira and Emperor go head to head.
Right. Yeah. I think Osira would have
Yeah, she'd have a leg down on that one.
she'd have a fight out for her. I would not want to go against
against
Giorgio.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just like so many of the characters, and we'll see what happens. I was
Totally.
distressed that Discovery got wrapped around in her tentacles.
Oh yeah, that was cool. That I didn't know that you could actually move the other ship with it when it does the spore drive. Like, oh, that's
interesting, huh?
Right?
So I'm interested to see how they're going to get out of that one, but they will.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
definitely.
But yeah.
Well,
so that's
one
it.
more pair of episodes to go. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I know. 12 and 13. Yeah.
Yep. Then we'll wrap up the season.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
thank you.
Thank you, Jayne. Appreciate it. Oh, it's always wonderful. And thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you.
Tune in next time. And in the meantime, live long and prosper.
Live long and prosper. I still, oh my God, can't do that very well. Well, you know what? That's not too bad.
Oh, that's good. You got it. Yes.
You all witnessed it here. This is the
there you
first
go.
time.
Great ending to this episode.
Literally the first time I've done it. It's witnessed here. Oh, I'm never going to let it go. Okay.
That's it.
Bye.
Hold it. Bye-bye all.
Bye.